Chapter 13 of The Adventures of the 11 Cuff Buttons. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Recording by Amelia Chesley. The Adventures of the 11 Cuff Buttons by James Francis Thierry. Chapter 13. "Come in," called the Countess. We entered. "Well, Mr. Holmes, to what am I indebted for the honour of this visit, and for the privilege of seeing you rigged up in the valet's clothes?" she asked, a little coldly, I thought, as she motioned us to chairs, and laid down the French novel she had been reading. "Only to my desire for a little information relative to your noble husband's cigars, your ladyship. It would greatly assist me in clearing up the mystery of the robbery. Never mind the disguise, I've worn worse," returned Holmes politely. The Countess frowned. "Why, have some of the Earl's cigars been stolen too, as well as the cuff buttons?" she asked. "No, but they have something to do with them, though. Now, when was the last time that the Earl smoked a Pampano cigar, and where was he at the time?" "Those wretched things from the Philippines, with the terrible odour? He only smoked one this week, and that was Monday morning, just after breakfast, in his room. I made Harrigan take the box of them away and hide it, so he couldn't get any more." "Ah," said Holmes, a smile gleaming on his eager face, "that was just the time when some of the diamond cuff buttons disappeared. Now where were you all during Monday morning?" "Right here in my own room, of course, having Teresa arrange my hair. I had breakfast served to me in here, and didn't go downstairs till noontime." "And when was the Earl's room swept out?" pursued Holmes. "Really, Mr. Holmes, what funny questions you do ask," said the Countess, smiling. "The Earl's room was swept out about 11:30 that noon, as soon as I came down and ordered Natalie to do it, after I saw the mess of cigar ashes the Earl had left on the carpet." "It's my business to ask funny questions, also to catch thieves, no matter how highly placed in society they are," said Holmes, rising from his chair. "Your ladyship, you have now unwittingly given yourself away entirely. You stole at least one of the cuff buttons, I am positive. Now give it up before I publish it from the housetops." And Holmes stood there with arms folded, and regarded the Countess in a very grim and determined manner, while I stood at one side, my mouth open as usual. The Countess turned white, then red, then pulled out her handkerchief and began to weep, which was disconcerting to the relentless Holmes. "To think that I should be insulted so by a perfect stranger in my own home!" And the Countess wept some more. "What earthly connection is there between your silly questions about the Earl's cigars and the diamond robbery, I should like to know?" "Simply this," returned Holmes patiently, as the Countess wiped her tear-stained face with her handkerchief. "With the aid of my powerful microscope, I was enabled to find that the specks of cigar ashes adhering to the soles of your shoes that you wore Monday, the ones that I was compelled to take for evidence last night, and replaced in your room this morning, were from a Pampano cigar, and as you told me that the only time recently that the Earl smoked one of that brand was Monday morning, in his room, and that his room was swept out Monday noon, that proves conclusively that you were in his room during Monday morning. The fact that you also claim to have been up here in your own room all during Monday morning shows that you had a strong motive for concealing your presence in the Earl's room at the time some of the cuff buttons disappeared, which can only mean that you wish to cover up your theft. Is that clear enough?" "I suppose so," remarked the Countess listlessly, rising and going over to her dresser at one side of the room, where she unlocked one of the drawers, took out the cuff button Holmes was after, and handed it to him. "Here is your horrid old diamond cuff button. I wish I had never seen it. I am not the thief, anyhow. That miserable fellow from Australia is the one that stole it, Billy Budd, and he gave it to me to hide for him until he could dispose of it safely. I did it for a joke on George, as I never did like the hideous glaring things, even if they were a present from King George the First to his ancestor. And that's all I know about it. So there! Budd only gave me one of the cuff buttons, and I don't know where the others are, and I can't say that I care very much either. Now are you finished with me?" "Entirely so, your ladyship, except to inform you that since breakfast this morning I have recovered 2 other cuff buttons besides this one, from Thornycroft and Yensen, and they both gave me the same song and dance that you did, about the wicked William Budd having been the author of their downfall. He seems to have had a whole lot to do with the robbery, and is also the man who assaulted your husband during Monday night when he entered his room to steal the last pair of the cuff buttons, and was evidently frightened away before he could smooch the one in his left cuff, having taken the one in his right cuff. I am satisfied that you had nothing to do with the assault, but your action in receiving the one stolen gem from Budd, and then striving to throw the blame for it on your brother-in-law, Lord Launcelot, is reprehensible enough. I shall see what the Earl has to say about it." And in a moment Holmes, bowing suavely, motioned me to follow him out of the room. We came downstairs again, and Holmes tackled the Earl in the library. "Well, your lordship, here's the third one of your bally cuff buttons," he began, as he handed it to him, "and the name of the person who had it is—" The voice grew inaudible to me as Holmes bent down and whispered the name into the Earl's ears. At the shock of the revelation, the Earl slid down in his chair until he seemed to be sitting on his shoulder blades, feebly put one hand up to his brow, and exclaimed, "What, my wife? Good heavens! I say there, Harrigan, you may pour me out a glass of wine. I mean a stiff bracer of brandy." In a moment the butler came running in with a bottle of the firewater, and poured out a glass of it for the Earl, who grabbed it and downed it at one gulp, then said, "Now I feel somewhat restored, Holmes. Tell me how on earth you found out that she took it." My marvellous partner told the gaping quintet, composed of the Earl, Tooter, Thornycroft, Launcelot, and Hicks, how he had pried the third cuff button out of her ladyship, and when he had finished the Earl rang for Donald MacTavish, the second footman, and sent him after the Countess. In a few minutes Scotty had bowed the mistress of the castle into our presence, and she stood in the doorway very cold and reserved. "Well, Annabel, what have you got to say for yourself?" demanded the Earl. "I've been robbed by my coachman, robbed by my secretary, and now, by thunder, I've even been robbed by my wife. And Holmes says that you claim that William X. Budd of Australia put you up to it. How about it, eh?" "Well, George, you know I never did like those diamond cuff buttons, and when Billy Budd came to me Monday morning with one of them, I thought it would be a good chance to play a trick on you. I didn't know that the others were going to be stolen too, and I thought you would have enough left. You have any number of regular pearl cuff links anyhow that can be worn to society functions, and not as if you were an end man in a minstrel show, which is all that those big glaring diamond things are fit for. Mr. Holmes told me he had replaced all the shoes that disappeared last night, as he took them for the purpose of finding out where the stolen cuff buttons were by his peculiar hocus-pocus methods. So you can't accuse me of having taken them too. I found my pair of shoes in a corner of my room when I returned there after breakfast. Now will you forgive me? Billy Budd is gone, so I don't suppose there will be any further trouble," the Countess concluded, gazing appealingly at her husband. The others all looked up with surprise as she mentioned the return of the shoes, and then turned their eyes toward Holmes with mixed admiration and perplexity, while the Earl replied, "Well, you may thank your lucky stars, Annabel, that I am such an easy-going fellow as I am known to be, or else high life in London would be aroused by gossip of another divorce. I'll forgive you, but don't let it happen again." "All right, George, thank you, but I still think that Launcelot is responsible for the disappearance of the other 8 cuff buttons." With which Parthian shot, the Countess of Puddingham left the room. "Still got it in for brother Launcie, eh?" grinned Holmes, as the Earl put the third gem in his vest pocket. "Look here, I want to know the reason for this prejudice on her part." "Well, I don't mind telling you," returned the Earl with a smile, as the accused Launcelot got very embarrassed. "My brother was greatly opposed to my marrying Annabel, for social reasons, because of her proximity to the tea and spice business, as I suppose you have become aware. So naturally, after we were married, she hasn't looked on him with very much favour, to say the least. But ich kibibble," he added, as he straightened up in his chair. "We've got back 3 out of the lost 11 gems, anyhow, so we'll all go down to the wine cellar and celebrate a little. Thornycroft, I guess we'll have all those bills audited for payment, and cheques made out for them, So I'll declare a holiday for you, and invite you down to share the drinks, since you didn't steal the third gem. Come along, gentlemen." To which invitation we all responded by following the genial Earl down the corridor, through the kitchen, where Louis and Ivan were quarrelling about something or other as usual, and down the cellar stairs to that mysterious region where Harrigan the butler held forth. End of chapter 13.